live, sir?
Brilliant. Shall we? I haven't gone live in a long time, but
Right,
it's nice. But it's nice.
right.
Nice to go live.
So, namaste, good
Namaste.
evening,
Good
and
evening.
welcome to the second episode of TuriyaTalks Season 3. The
Thank you.
pace of the global economy is slowing down due to the outbreak of novel coronavirus. It has affected daily life, and due to its immense spreading capacity, most of the countries in the world are forced to remain locked down for breaking the exponential curve. Access to justice has been challenged by COVID-19. Here, technology has been highlighted in giving the access to justice. Today, we have with us an esteemed personality who works as an arguing counsel across the country, dealing with complex legal issues and believes that law can be accessible with the help of modern technology. With that said, I warmly welcome Sir Yadunath Bhargava in our show today. Welcome to Turiya Talk, sir.
Thank you, Sandhya. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Truly, we live in very challenging times, and like all domains, the legal profession stands challenged severely, and uh, and uh, and you're right. Technology is perhaps the magic wand that will get us through some of the challenges that we are facing today, and I'm excited to talk about it. It's a subject that is very dear to me. That is something that I've been living with now for over 5 to 6 years. I have spent considerable amount of time at the cost of time at the bar, which is always difficult for various reasons. But I'm glad I did that. I had never expected that COVID-19 would come, and we would see a situation like that. But happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to to being of whatever resistance I can in trying to explain how perhaps we can tide over this crisis, which seems unprecedented at the moment.
And now
Right.
we are back with season 3. Be a part of the conversation now and get a chance to interact with guest speakers from all walks of life every Tuesday and Saturday at 6:30 p.m. only on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to Turiya Talks and hit the bell icon to never miss an update.
Once again, welcome to Turiya Talk, sir. Sir, I would like to start our session by asking you the first question of the evening. What does the term access to justice mean in our constitution?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And fairly expansive. You've gone for the big one. You hit the six on the first ball, right?
Right.
And access our constitution sort of, if I can argue, our constitution revolves around the concept of access to justice. And very recently, this has been captured by consecutive Chief Justices of India. Whether I remember Justice Keher mentioning it, Chief Justice Keher mentioning it. I remember Chief Justice Deepak Mishra mentioning it. I remember Chief Justice Gogoi mentioning it, and very recently I remember Chief Justice Bobde mentioning it. And ironically, so um, one of India's great legal minds is in charge of the Supreme Court's E-Committee, which kind of is the pinnacle organization outside of the government, that is within the judiciary, that is right now doing things that, relevant to courts and technology and access to justice and so on and so forth. So all of these people have consecutively and unmistakably reinforced the fact that access to justice is a constitutional doctrine. Uh, where you would find it, you'd find it in many places. Our constitution derives its influence going back from, if I can say, the Magna Carta, right, where finally the king permitted writs, including against the king, right? So basically, what that meant was that everybody, including the king and barons and everybody, all people were subject to the rule of law, and writs allowed you to call for those rights in the event those rights are, even in the event your right is sort of you're not given your right, or your right is taken away. And therein lies the founding principle of access to justice, right? So Article 32 allows any person, the classes, access to justice, right? 226 allows the classes access to justice. So that's one way of looking at access to justice. Equality before the law is one way of looking at access to justice, right? If you look at Article 39, right, that is, in terms of legal aid, that's access to justice. So access to justice makes itself present all over the Constitution. So unmistakably, it's a constitutional doctrine, right? Uh, Furthermore, it's also a common law founding principle, right, which preceded the Constitution, and which has its and therefore has its elements universally across constitutions around the world, right? Whether it's the United Kingdom, whether it's the US, whether it's India, whether it's Australia, whether it's South Africa. If I believe, I could be wrong here. South Africa even has it somehow mentioned in the Constitution. I could be wrong, but I remember reading it in one of the Law Commission reports that they have access to justice somehow mentioned in terms of equality and justice and so on and so forth. Don't quote me on that, but I remember it vaguely. So, from a constitutional perspective, access to justice is why the Constitution exists, right? It is to dispense justice to the people, right? If And interestingly so, for any practitioner of the law, I hope I'm not putting you to sleep, Sandhya, because this is pure law.
Yeah.
For any practitioner of the law functions curiously in two parts, if I can call it, right? One is the law itself, and one is pursuit of justice using the law, right? So typically, the higher courts, which would include judges of the High Court and judges of the Supreme Court, they're all called justices, right? They're always in the pursuit of justice, to do the right thing, right? To ensure the right outcome, to ensure the just outcome. So therein lies your fundamental principle, right? So the reason that they can make law, the reason that they can create law, that they can ensure that there is justice, goes to show the importance of access to justice within our Constitution, right? And that again is connected to the independence of the judiciary. There's no way one judge can tell another judge as to what he can do. All you have is a right of appeal, right? So interestingly, I think we have one of like many some other written constitutions or unwritten constitutions, from which we find inspiration. I think access to justice finds its place in so many parts of our Constitution, right? And it's definitely a constitutional principle, however which way you look at it.
Right, sir. Sir, our
I'm sorry,
country is
that was a
still
very
trying.
legal question, right? So
Right, right.
it has many.
Yeah.
So your audiences who are perhaps not lawyers might not find too much interest in it, but some of the stuff that we can discuss in the context of technology perhaps are more interesting because they're very
Really, really.
forward-looking, right?
Right. Sir, our country is still trying to implement the new technological aspects, but it is said that the entire justice system is shut down and
Mm-hmm.
suspended till lockdown ends. Should we address the issue on an immediate basis and find a solution, or wait for things to gain stability?
Uh, like all answers, this is a yes and no answer, right? Um, Typically, because let me spend 1 minute trying to explain the justice system, and this is a universal truth. Lawyers are a curious animal, and judges come from lawyers or are connected to lawyers. The bar and the bench go hand in hand, and lawyers look backwards, right? Especially in common law jurisdictions, to find answers to go forward. So that's what is called stare decisis or past precedent, right? And as a consequence, we don't, as social animals, we are not that amenable to change, right? And so the problem of COVID-19 being a disruptor is a universal problem across legal systems around the world. It's just not in India, right?
India.
If you look at the United States, they stand disrupted. If you look at various countries, it's completely shut down. And the simple reality is that most Western countries will have dockets that are fairly slim. What I mean by that is it will have 3 or 4 cases or 5 cases in the higher courts. But in the lower courts, even in Western countries, they're usually packed like sardines because there are a lot of people. They're jostling, whether it be small claims, whether it be divorces or whatever, domestic violence or whatever, right? Um, and the problem with that is that when you have a lot of people packed into a small space and they're all trying to speak, that kind of doesn't work for COVID-19, right? That's precisely what you should not do in COVID-19. So typically, most court systems around the world now stand disrupted, right? So in that sense, court systems as we knew it, efficiency or not as we knew it pre-COVID, doesn't exist right now anywhere in the world, right? So it's not unique to India. But what's interesting is that luckily, unlike many legal systems who were very dogmatic and refused to change, India started under the aegis of the courts, right? So each high court has its own IT committee or E committee, and the Supreme Court has an E committee that sits over the high courts, but they have their own members. Now, these people started implementing e-courts, right, way back, if I'm not mistaken, 2007, right? Obviously, they were not necessarily the most technologically wow ecosystems, right? They were built by government with a shoestring budget. If I'm not mistaken, 900 or 1,000 crores, which is hardly anything in the context of technology, right? In technology, you hear of billion-dollar investments, right? When you want to change things. But in spite, they build some robust systems for district courts, for high courts, for the Supreme Court, which is why you had a CIS system, which was a case information system. You could find whether your case is listed tomorrow and so on and so forth. So you had some of the trappings or some of the foundations, right? And then there was if I'm not mistaken, between 2014 there was the part 2 of that e-courts committee. So we were already building up. Of course, nobody had expected the pandemic to come. So because there was some sort of foundation, the courts, especially the high courts, could function. So today the Supreme Court's in vacation right now. It'll be back from vacation, right? In fact, it will come back from vacation yesterday. So they have already started video conference hearings, which let me assure you is unprecedented, right? The Supreme Court of the country hearing video conference, and of course, the United States Supreme Court is very different from the Indian Supreme Court for various reasons. But in terms of legal acumen and class, I think Indian Supreme Court is out there and comparable to anybody, including the United Supreme Court. Some of the greatest jurists have come out of there in terms of judges and lawyers. So my sense is that we are doing it, right? And we're one of the few countries that are doing it in terms of video conferencing. High courts have taken from the Supreme Court, and various high courts have started video conferencing. I am personally aware of the Kerala High Court, which has done a fantastic job, right? And their E-committee has done some fantastic work. Similarly, I believe Telangana has done some good work. I believe the Madras High Court has done some good work. I am not aware of the other high courts personally, but I'm sure they are as good. So my sense is you're right that the justice machinery has slowed down, but it hasn't come to a stop. Urgent matters are still being heard. Is that the conducive situation? My answer is no. But we are all learning, and we are much better than, if you look at peer review, you would find India to be much better. The other places are completely chaotic. Does that answer your question? I mean, was that helpful?
Right. Since we are talking about video conferencing, I think I just wanted to say that since lockdown, various high courts and Supreme Court, they have started hearing cases through the use of video conferencing facilities. But I believe they are restricted to urgent matters considered by the judges only. And this lands us in doubt that will video conferencing in courts maintain confidentiality to enable clients and lawyers to confer in private. Secondly, another thing I wanted to say, sir, similarly, how does one secure the sanctity of witnesses' testimony during video call evidence?
Okay, so you mentioned a lot of things there, right? So let's make this more an iterative thing. I mean, let's make it more a discussion thing. So the first question you said was video conferencing for urgent matters. I think the reason it's for urgent matters simply is because uh, COVID-19 hit out of nowhere, right? If you look at a peer review, right, other than hospitals where you have to get treated, right? If you look at any other institution, they're not working at all because you just don't know how to work, right? How do you get people from their homes to the place without actually infecting them, right? People who have said that the lockdown is crazy and then we should open up have all regretted it because the minute you open up, the cases go up, right? So this is not a easy problem to deal with. So my sense is some of the administrators of the court are in their wisdom trying to figure out how to scale up, right? They do have the technology right now. I'm not sure their video conferencing technology is the best in the world. I'm sure there will be a lot of iterations and it'll get better and better. But at some point in time, you will be able to run a full court on video, right? If I'm not mistaken, beginning 2017, the, the Delhi High Court, the Delhi had already started with a pilot project for a virtual court. If I remember correctly, Justice Chandrachud had mentioned it somewhere, and that pilot project was then thereafter taken to various cities, right? Where small claims like your driving licenses, penalties, they could all be dealt with virtually, right? I don't personally have an experience of that. I stopped driving long ago, but so I really don't know that. But my sense is that's the right direction, right? So a lot of my friends within the legal tech community in the US have been talking about this in the US and in various other countries contextually, and it's so nice to see the Ecodes committee doing what people are speaking in the private domain in India. That's precisely what I was trying to tell you. I think I think our country is going to be, quite frankly, a vanguard if we can take serious judicial work online. And the caveat is that we are not trying to say that it should replace normal courts, right? Sandhya, for a lawyer, especially for an arguing counsel, the biggest high is to stand in court with a gown that looks like Batman's cape, right, and argue. It's the biggest high, right? To be able to convince a judge about something, and taking that away from me is robbing me of the very reason to live at times. But so most lawyers will be fairly dejected to if you obviously tell them that you'll have to sit down on a chair and you'll have to look at somebody and argue a case. But that's the reality of the time, right? And I don't think anybody's making a case that you would take it away. But if you look at the way the world is going, and to your first question, are we going to wait for the pandemic to go and everything to get normal for courts to come back? My sense is the only answer is for video conferencing to be a serious solution for a lot of legal matters until we know what the hell we're dealing with. So that's your first question. The second question, I think, was a segue to that, where you said uh, that does it create a right to privacy? Now, that's where I want to have a conversation. Why do you think it creates a right to privacy? Because there are arguments for and against. As a
See,
layperson, why do you think it creates a right to privacy?
few technology and few calls like video app calls and whatever technology is being used, they're not safe, some people say. So maybe from that perspective we asked.
You're right. So no technology is safe, right? So, but had we all thought that no technology is safe, we would not be banking on technology today, right? We would not be having driverless cars. I mean, most of the cars are autonomous. That is, there's still a driver, but a lot of the driving happens. We wouldn't have autopilot on planes. We wouldn't be sending stuff off to space, right? our entire financial system would not be automated, right? So
Right.
if you look at technology is literally driving the world, and all those technologies are also susceptible to security threats, right? But it's when you talk about security, right, you can't talk in absolutes, right? You can't say that I will stop going out because I'm scared that a coconut will fall on my head and I will die. It's a possibility that if you
Right.
go and there is a coconut tree, it will fall on your head and you will die. But you can't stop living and you sit at home for the rest of your life because the odd possibility that a coconut will fall on your head and die. But if there are more coconut trees and those coconut trees are not kept, the chances that it will fall on your head and you will get hurt are higher. So how do you deal with that? You essentially introduce systems, right, that make your ecosystem more secure, right? Uh, so my sense is that whenever they talk about technology, they talk about it in absolute terms, right? That it's unsecure. Nothing is secure, right? You don't know if I'm going to be alive after this call. I mean, I can be dead after this call, and when you and we try and have a conversation, and you might just hear that, oh guy, that guy popped it, right? I don't know what happened. So when we live in a world that is completely, and this is perhaps the time that obviously reminds us that where it's completely in absolute and we really don't know what will happen the next moment, to even imagine that technology will be an absolute is perhaps the wrong starting point, right? But yes, there can be serious problems with privacy. There are arguments for and against it, right? For example, there are cases where privacy might be a concern, where there are cases that involved sexual offenses and children, where you want to make sure that their identities are kept absolutely secret. Offenses, serious, heinous offenses against women, including rape, where you want to make sure that their names are kept secret. So yes, there is enough technology out there to be able to mask such things. I believe the existing system does that. I'm not sure if it does it enough, because typically most systems that are made that are historical systems or legacy systems are not necessarily that sort of up to date. But that said, I mean, the intent is there. It's just a matter of making it happen, and I'm sure we will. So my sense is you cannot write off video conferencing just because there is the chance that you will have a data theft. And the third part is that a lot of the core data ought to be public data, right? So, for example, you can walk into court today and hear any proceedings, right? Subject to security and other issues that might be there. Similarly, all judgments are available for everybody to see. Pleadings are not, and there's a lot of argument back and forth whether pleadings should be or not, right? There are a lot of papers written and as to what an open data policy should contain, because assuming that it comes under the Right to Information Act, whether that will be deemed to be open data, whether it will be deemed to be confidential information, so on and so forth, right? But the moral of the story is that my personal belief is that all data should be open, because when data is open is when you will find maximum amount of innovation, right? Because you never know where the next best idea comes from, right? It can come from some kid in law school, right? Or it could come from a judge who has finished his domain in the Supreme Court, has been there, done there, seen it all, and then he thinks this entire thing is a ton of horseshit, right? Sorry, but respectfully. And he designs the best system to deal with the horseshit, right? So you never know where the next big idea will come from. And not putting data out there is a short way to make sure that that best idea never is given birth to, or never comes to fruition, right? Never comes to never blossoms. Typically in technology, if you need to move if you need to move ahead, and if you need to make quantum leaps, you need to make data available.
Right.
Of course, it needs to be in a particular regime. That's why people keep talking about privacy and protection. There's a lot. I can spend another hour talking about data protection and privacy, so I'll let it be. but data needs to be open, right? So it's a delicate balance. It needs to be private and protected and secure, but at the same time it needs to be open, right? There's enough material to suggest that GDPR, which is sort of the vanguard of data, which a lot of countries try to ape and emulate, is not necessarily the best model, right? And there are serious business and security concerns why Europe put that regime into place, right? Because they wanted to make sure that their data is not mined without any benefit to them. That's one of the reasons why they put GDPR in place, right? India is not that country. India is one of the countries that is now wanting to be ahead in the race of data, right? So, for example, the United States is doing very well, China is doing very well, and it's high time India, with its data and with its intellectual capacity, is able to do something about it. Otherwise, we'll be left behind, right? So my sense is data should be open, uh, subject to, of course, privacy and security concerns. So, considering all the things that I've told you, I don't think uh, video conferencing is going to create any more of a data question or a privacy question than they already exist, right? I can spend a lot more time. I'm sure we'll run out of time because I can speak quite frankly for hours on this. The
Right.
third question that you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, is you said something about
Sanctity, sanctity,
of
sanctity,
the witness,
sanctity witness,
witness.
witness.
Yeah. So this is something that I really love. Right? I'll tell you why. Uh, there's a problem in the practice of the tradition, right? In India. So when I came back from the US, I tried to break that, and I was I was fairly I was fairly ambitious to do that. Maybe stupid, right? I don't know. Time will tell. So I hillbillied around the country, arguing in every possible jurisdiction that I got a brief in, right? And that was allowed because in many jurisdictions. So basically, my home jurisdiction is Bombay. I come from the Bombay bar, right? Bombay has original jurisdiction. There are some larger cities that have original jurisdiction, Delhi, Calcutta. Then you have the Supreme Court. But there are many places that doesn't have original jurisdiction. So even if you are arguing a very, very complicated case, you will be before a district judge, right? And a district judge has a docket which is completely varied. He'll be listening to bails until the Commercial Courts Act came, right? Now, obviously, commercial matters go to a particular a particular court. So before that, he would hear bails, he would hear all sorts of causes, right? And what was interesting was the justice at that level, right, which is where the actual matters, actual trial happened, right, actual evidence happened, was very different. So before a district judge in India, right, evidence is recorded in a paragraph. So I will ask you a question, Sandhya, what is your name? Can you put your name? Can you tell me your name for the record? You'll say my name is Sandhya. So they'll write it down. So typically in the higher courts, assuming before a commission or before an arbitration, right, arbitral tribunal, there'll be a question and answer. My question will be recorded, answer will be recorded. There is no submission there. But what am I trying to say? What am I trying to say is that if you look at the Evidence Act was made originally for the juries when there was jury trial, where fact was found, the factual determination was made by the jury, and then the judge came in and instructed the jury on the law, right? So you had to actually show a witness was not credible. Now is that's not the case at all. So today you have a very hybrid, mixed up system, right? As to what amounts to proved or not. There are a lot of Supreme Court cases on as to what amounts to proved or not, and what and what should weigh on the judge's mind when he gives the final decision. It's just not that fact. He has to take the entire material before him, right? The entire matter before him. So in evidence, right, what would happen typically is that you ask questions before one judge, the judgment is coming from somebody else. So in terms of demeanor, he doesn't know what his demeanor was, whether the guy was lying or not, right? Whether there is a if there is a statement made, whether that statement was made, in what context that statement was made, if a commissioner is made, what statement is made. So in this considering these circumstances, having a Q&A, right, on video conferencing is the best idea. So now that we are having this conversation, anybody who looks at this conversation can tell you what my demeanor is and what your demeanor is, what your questions were and what my answers were. Was I trying to duck your answers? Was I aware of the answers? Was I thinking of those answers? Was I coming up with, clever things to say? Did I stop myself? Right? Or did I say something wrong? And what was my expression when I said it? Right? All those things, that aha moment, that smoking gun, right, can actually be possible on video. So my argument is exactly the opposite. That you will bring unprecedented amount of efficiency into evidence, right, through video conferencing. It's the other way around, that when you put Q&A on video, right, the judge who is looking at that evidence can actually see what the witness is doing and what the lawyer is doing. Is the lawyer badgering the witness? Is the lawyer trying to confuse the witness? Is it just a very simple, sweet witness who's trying to answer honestly, and the lawyer is a very shrewd guy trying to get question answers out of him? Even that is possible, right? Where the lawyer tries to put things in your mouth and then gets that recorded. So all those things will go away because it will be there to see. That's what technology brings. It brings unprecedented transparency. You cannot hide. So my answer to your third question will be the exact opposite of your concern. I think this is the best thing that can ever happen to the Evidence Act.
Right.
Did I confuse you?
No, of course not. I think people will be very happy to get this insightful information.
I hope it's
They should,
insightful.
yeah, they shouldn't be concerned at all. So I can see
I hope so too.
many users have joined in. In case
Oh
you all
wow.
have missed
Hi.
any content, we are discussing on the topic of access to justice with Mr. Yadunath
Yes.
Bhargavan. And sir has
Hi.
discussed the technological impact and implementation required at present for the smooth functioning of the Indian judicial system in the context to the present COVID scenario. Before we take up few questions, sir, only my concern is, of course, you talked about backed attire, so backlight attire. So the pandemic has affected the route of livelihood for legal professionals.
Yes.
Would you agree with the statement?
Yes, it has. It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. But the legal profession is not alone, right? You've had 44 million migrants, I don't know if that number is correct, uh, that have lost their livelihoods, which is why the Honorable Prime Minister has announced a scheme in those states where these migrants have gone back to. You've had you've had shopkeepers who have lost their livelihoods because they can't open their shops. You've
Right.
had people who work in the restaurant industries city creatures like me. I love to spend my time in Bombay. I love my time in Delhi. I love going out in Delhi. I love my time in Bangalore. That's another place I spend. And all the other cities that I go, Jaipur and a few other places. And when we go out, typically, I mean, your idea of going out is to go to a good restaurant, have a good meal, right? At the end of the day, that's what you go to a city for, and you meet your friends there. Today, there are no restaurants, right? That entire industry is dead, and one doesn't know if it'll ever come back. And this was one industry that employed a whole lot of people, and I have a lot of friends in hospitality, and no one has a job at the moment, right? And there are people who have taken loans, they don't know how to pay those loans back. There are people who have to pay rents, they don't know how to pay rents back. Just before this call, a friend of mine, she's the editor of a huge magazine, she said she has a friend of hers who's come from abroad and she has no money to pay for her rent, and her landlord is essentially just annoying her, and her house is flooded. So all sorts of problems are there, and lawyers' problems similarly exist. They're not unique, but yes, just like the entire country is aggrieved, lawyers are severely aggrieved. Some bar associations have tried to help out, but my sense is most of this help is woefully short. Uh, uh, I don't know what the right answer is, but I definitely know that taking this online and keeping the profession going or keeping the practice going is definitely one way to ensure that you continue to earn your livelihood, right? So my sense is, uh, if I can use your platform to convey one thing, technology in the law ought to be inclusive and is inclusive, right? there seems to be, and this, when the reason I started thinking about technology is because I had a vision about this. Right, I met some really interesting people in technology way back in 2014, and I said, "Gee, how do you marry technology and the law?" And for the longest time, it was a vision, right? And there's a guy called Richard Susskind who's written a beautiful book on technology and the law. It's called Online Codes, and he says, uh, "Vision without action is a hallucination." So I was hallucinating for the longest time. I was hallucinating about, we can do a lot of things, and that led me to do a few things. So I basically, I've given ideas. I have helped promote a whole lot of movements in this area. Some of them are coming to fruition. Uh, but all along, when I used to talk about these things, right, the first thing that would come, people would talk about is robo lawyers and how lawyers will lose their jobs, and how lawyers will get replaced, and that is absolutely incorrect, right? If anything else, the pie will get better, bigger. Lawyers will have more jobs, right? Lawyers will have more things to do, because what access does is it gives access. When you say access to justice, it increases access to the service, right? So as a consequence, there are more people coming in, and the same amount of people who are serving them. So as a consequence, you will definitely see an increase in your work. So my suggestion to lawyers who are going through a lean phase, and a lot of lawyers are going through a lean phase, is to hang in there and get savvy when it comes to technology, because thanks to the Ecodes committee, right, things like e-filing and VCs have already started, which means you can continue to practice, right? You don't even need to meet a client. You can have a Microsoft Teams account, a Zoom account, or whatever account you want to, and you can meet your client. You can get instructions, right? Make sure to charge them money, and have it filed, taken to court, do all the advisory that you need to, right? Will it change things? Of course, it will change things. There will be a monumental change in how lawyers organize themselves. You might see the whole concept of a law firm being challenged. That's my personal opinion. This goes back way back to a 1950 Yale Law Journal article, which fundamentally debunked the concept of a law firm and how it just doesn't work for various reasons. So you might see such structures being challenged. But I'm not concerned for that. What my concern would be is that whether individual practitioners, which include members of law firms, right, can make a decent living and practice the law and carry on the work of justice. My sense is yes, they can do it even better.
Right, sir.
Did I answer your question?
Legal services are essential activities, we all know, and that are urgent. And of course, for those it is urgent, they have to knock on the door of justice. So I think, sir, we have got a couple of questions from people. What
Yes.
are e-courts? Is pandemic the best opportunity for expansion of e-courts facilities on a larger segment, sir?
Hi. You should direct that question to the Ecodes committee and not me. Ecodes are essentially was, as I said, it was a program that was started way back in 2007, and now I think it's in its second or third iteration. And e-courts in the Supreme Court, for example, the entire e-filing, where you can file the entire thing without actually going to the Supreme Court, is part of the e-courts movement, right? And I believe the e-courts movement is now going to sort of go all the way down into each of the districts. I think there are around 653 districts and 653 odd district courts. The number, I'm not exact on the numbers, but that's sort of the ballpark figure. So my sense is e-courts are going to be a big thing, whether pandemic or not. Yes, the pandemic now has forced that the e-courts rollout has to be really quick. As I said earlier, there are pilot projects already on virtual courts in various states. If I'm not mistaken, in all states right now. And these virtual courts are for small claims. There's a national data grid, judicial data grid, that will tell you exactly how many cases are pending, what cases are pending, what's not pending. That kind of data is especially helpful in the context of rollout of e-courts, because you know what the efficiency of those e-courts are especially if you can get the national data grid to start collecting that kind of granular drop down information. And once the e-codes get in there and it becomes part of the ecosystem, then there is no stopping it. I mean, you might actually see a fantastic one. You might 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you might actually see one of the best legal systems in the world in one of the largest democracies.
We can take up few more questions. Question from Dijoy Basak. Importance of e-connectivity for the courts during COVID-19 lockdown, and how can technology benefit litigants and access to justice, sir?
Hi, Dijoy. So when you say e-connectivity, it can mean a lot of things, right? E-connectivity between the courts. So, for example, uh, a big Achilles heel in India is criminal justice, right? And the E-Codes Committee, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the E-Codes Committee who has launched uh, what they call the ICMJR or JMR, which is essentially putting the entire criminal justice system on the grid and creating metadata for it, right? So I can give you an example of what the Kerala High Court has done. They recently launched it. So they've created a dashboard for the High Court judge. He can see the information he can receive the information directly from the concerned police station where the crime has been registered, right? And that is and that information is equally available to the prosecution, right? The lawyer that is arguing for the case for the state, and to you as a lawyer if you are a defense lawyer, right? So as a consequence, what happens in criminal justice is there's a lot of rent seeking behavior that happens. I'll get you this information, I'll get this, but this is the amount of money that is payable. All that rent seeking information is gone. It's all available at the tip of the this thing, right? Sometimes the files go missing again because it's rent seeking. So all of that possibilities are completely eliminated on the click of a button, right? You would have entire information about a particular case. Now, if I'm not mistaken, what they want to do is they want to ensure that everything with respect to that case, whether it is the FIR, whether it is a charge sheet, and everything else is mentioned there in that metadata, right? So it's very interesting because you can extrapolate, you can take that data, you can run a lot of data science on it, you can figure out what is going wrong in your criminal justice system. Instead of having law commissions that will come once in a while and give dispensations, you can have on the go understanding of how do you resolve the problems within your criminal justice system, whether it's policing, whether it's courts, whether it's keeping the right people out of jail or the wrong people in jail, right? So that's one example of e-connectivity. And I think that's fantastic. It's a huge quantum leap for the criminal justice system. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, the other things that the E-Codes Committee is doing, and I'm no spokesman for the E-Codes Committee, but because I obviously I'm a student of this area and I'm doing a lot in this area. Obviously, I keep tabs. Is they're doing they're also candid enough to understand that technology will in fact be, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere Justice Chandrachud actually said technology will help justicing become a service. That's huge, right?
Seriously.
So that's huge. So today, when you go to the Supreme Court, so when you go to the Supreme Court, even for a lawyer like me, it's like you're going to meet God themselves, right? Uh, and when a Supreme Court judge says that justicing will become a service, and there are a lot of people who have said it, and these are all very well-meaning people, very intelligent people, and they work very hard to ensure justice, right? Uh, that's huge because it goes to the fulcrum of what they call legal design. And I'm a big fan of legal design. I practice legal design. We're working on legal design. Legal design is typically, how does law get made, right? Law gets made because the government thinks that something should be done, right? And then they come up with a piece of legislation, and law is made, right? And then that law has to be then implemented by the courts, right? That's the whole system. And if you do the mistake of going on the wrong side of it, they'll pick you up and they'll put you in front of a judge, right? Now, what legal design means is that they're like, hey, I think that whole process is wrong, right? Of course, in the past, ever since the Magna Carta or ever since the rule of law has evolved, we've never had technology. But now we have technology, we have designers. We can go and ask people as to whether they understand law, and I'm fairly certain a huge percentage of people don't understand law, and that's the starting point of the problem, right? Law is not just to be understood by lawyers, it's supposed to be understood by everybody, right? So how do you make law that everybody can understand? That's the starting point of, in my opinion, legal design, right? And putting the consumer of justice, that is the citizen, at the center, and building an ecosystem of law that the citizen can understand, cherish, and enjoy its participations. Perhaps lofty goals, but we'll get there someday. So for a Supreme Court judge to say that technology will make law justicing a service, it'll make it more service oriented, is huge, and it's in the direction of legal design. So my sense is technology is going to be a game changer in so many ways that we don't even understand. There's so many nooks and crannies that you don't even see right now, that it'll affect and make some profound changes to the quality of our lives.
Right.
Did I answer that question? E-connectivity?
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, Davina. Davina's
Yeah.
here. She's a good friend of mine.
I think what she's saying I was supposed to say, but I didn't talk to Devina before with you, and first we
So
didn't
Davina is from
discuss that.
IIT Bombay. She's one of the
Okay.
smartest designers I have met. She and I are working on a few things. In fact, we were supposed to have a conversation, and I said, no, I have to go and I have to come and talk to you. And so Davina was very kind enough. So
Right.
yeah, Davina, I mean, I agree with you. So today, in fact, I was walking day before yesterday down below, and somebody met me, and we were walking together because this is the only thing that we do. And he said he was a technologist, and he said, I am looking to get some connections in Estonia. um, and the year, I think last April, I was in New York for a month, and the hotel I was staying in, which was in Soho, there was a beautiful couple. The wife was a lawyer who then turned a baker, and the husband was a technologist. So I could speak to both of them. And the husband essentially was running a technology company in Estonia, right? And so I was telling him, I said, hey, I'll be happy to connect you to him. He's a great guy. I don't know what he does, but happy to connect you to him, because I hung out with him. We hung out with each other for like 3 weeks. We became good friends. And then my question to him was, gee, why Estonia? Why not Bangalore? Why not Hyderabad, right? I mean, people sing praises about Estonia. So to your question, Devina, even though Estonia is a small country and it's so much more easier to manage, right? Like Singapore, right, is a small country. It's so much more easier to manage, and Singapore has made huge strides in law and technology. I think in spite of we being a big country, we might actually be able to give Estonia a run for its money. You're absolutely correct, and in fact, we need to, because with Singapore with 4 million people perhaps can do without technology. We with 130 crore people, we need technology if we want to bring access to justice. There's no way you can appoint judges or produce intelligent people to reach justice to so many people. Another very interesting thing that Richard Susskind says is that the irony of the times is that access to internet is more than access to justice, right? More people have access to internet than they have access to justice. So that's the irony. So the least we can do is bring justice online, and at least bring it at par with access to internet. Ideally, everybody should have access to justice, so access to justice should be much higher. So you're right. I mean, India has a long way to go, and it's an exciting journey. I think we should all participate. It's fun.
Right. Should we take up one more question? I think this question is from
Yes.
Tinanjali, and she is talking about women bearing a disproportionate brunt on various crises like disasters and violence. The COVID-19 global pandemic could follow this pattern, having devastating implication on women's access to justice. So, what is your take on this, sir? What are the courts and governments doing to address these challenges, basically?
Anjali, women and women, women's rights are a very sensitive topic. Uh, I think society has been very unfair to women for the longest time. The pendulum at times has swung the other way, but that's fine. Uh, uh, my sense is that women have been given a raw deal in spite of the COVID 19. I don't think COVID 19 has changed anything. Uh, Arguably, I don't read Indian newspapers. I just don't. My reading involves a bunch of tech reviews, some law stuff, and perhaps some of the English journals, because there's a lot of quality research out there. It's just not somebody's opinion. And from what I understand, the pandemic has created a lot of stress, domestic stress for some people, right? So for some people who were in bad marriages, they have said, gee, we were stupid, and they've decided to mend ways, and their marriages have gotten better, right? And for some people, it's just gotten worse, and they just don't have a place to go. And I really don't know, uh, and I'm being very practical, right? And this might sound extremely negative, but in a world where, and I live in Bombay at the moment. I Before this, I used to travel a lot. I used to live partly in Bangalore, in Delhi, and Bombay. Uh, in a world where we trying to figure out how to get hospital beds for people who have COVID, right? And we just don't know how to do that. And my sense is the medical system is going to have to change 360 degrees after this pandemic. God forbid there's something else that's coming our way, right? My sense is when systems are so inundated with just basic questions of life, right? Uh, it will be that certain crimes will go unnoticed, right? That is the reality of the situation. For example, most police officers who are frontline workers are so inundated with just keeping law and order in the context of coronavirus that it's unthinkable for them to investigate a crime or register a crime. And it's a crime to expect them to register a crime also, because at the end of the day, they are also human beings, right? So the unfortunate reality is that everyone is so overworked in the system at the moment, and at risk of their own life. You are going to see slippages, and that's the reality. But on the larger scale, COVID-19 or not, do women need to get out there? Yes. I have a daughter. I truly believe that the next generation is that of women, because the next generation is that of emotional intelligence, right? No one's going to expect you to go and chop a tree down. So if you don't
Right.
have to chop a tree down, chances are that women will be much more smarter than men. I'm
Right.
not saying women
So,
can't chop a tree down, just to be politically correct. But I'm just
right.
saying, if you don't have to chop a tree down, chances are that women would be more better than men.
I think we can only say that one can never deny access to justice to anyone, even in times of crisis. We may have to
True.
innovate, and the delivery system may have to be tweaked according to those special circumstances. But there cannot be a blanket ban on one's right to approach the court in times of need.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
So,
but Sandhya, you're absolutely correct. But again, I don't mean to cut you off. But the problem is, how do you decide that, right? Because when you say that urgent matters are allowed, at the end of the day, judges are humans, right? The problem is everybody goes to them and says my matter is urgent, right? They'll say that, you know what, I have a pain in the neck, that's urgent. Now, I'm sure it's urgent for you, but in the context of the larger scheme, how do you grade it? So again, these are things that technology can do very well. We don't have those technologies right now.
right.
The technologies can put things into buckets so much more easier. So I don't think 5 or 10 years from now, councils will be making money mentioning. That concept is insane. There is enough technology that can very easily decide whether there is urgency or not, the way you actually are able to put it. So
Right.
judges can obviously use their very valuable time to do other things.
So with your kind permission, can I wrap up the show?
Yes, of course. This is your show. You don't need my permission.
Right, so many questions. We never expected so many people to ask so many questions. I don't know.
I make a living out of talking, Sandhya. If you keep me going, I'll keep going.
Right.
There's somebody who's saying
I,
legal design. How is court messaging project been an out of the box tool for providing legal services? Legal design, as I said, Rishabh, is obviously using a different approach. You might want to read Margaret Hagan. She runs a design school out of Stanford. And she talks about legal design. There are a lot of other schools that talk about legal design. I'm not sure I completely agree that legal design ought to have a limited definition. In my opinion, when the judges of the Supreme Court created the basic structure of the Constitution and created fundamental rights, that was legal design. When you created PIL, that was legal design. But that was legal design agnostic of technology. Today, you can actually be creative in the law to actually deliver law to people using design, that is design and technology. And that's my definition of legal design. But nonetheless, Margaret Hagan is a good starting point for legal design. I didn't get the second part though. I mean, anyway, Sandhya, you got to wrap up. So, all right.
right. So we are at the end of our show today.
Yes.
Sir, thank you so much for
Thank you
taking
so much.
time
Thank you so much for having me.
for busy schedule and being a part of this episode. And I think as your friend from Bombay said that it was a wonderful experience and it was a great show.
Likewise.
In Turiya Talks, we always try to open up various aspects of the present scenario in the global economic spectrum. And today we were blessed to have Yadunath sir with us. Sir is very popular as Yadu. So if you go to Bombay and if you wish to find Yadunath sir, you please say Yadu. So
yes.
I think
Yes. So you just get down to Bombay and say Yadu. You might have a couple of dogs bark at you, and that's all that'll happen. You might actually need my phone number to do that.
Right.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
The show was dynamic. I will not just say interactive. I think we hope that you all have acquired the knowledge shared by your guest, and we urge you to implement it in your life if required at all. Otherwise, we always say please stay away from problems and you don't have to consult people, right?
Please stay away from lawyers, and Yadu is also something that you will hear.
Right. So I didn't say it directly. Yeah. So I said stay away from problems.
I get the drift. I read between lines, Sandhya. That's what I do.
Right. So those who have joined late can stream the entire episode in our channel. Let us know about your feedback in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and press the bell icon for receiving notifications from Turiya Talks. Until next time, I'm Sandhya Satodia signing off. Good night, take care, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you, Sandhya.
And now we are back with season 3. Be a part of the conversation now and get a chance to interact with guest speakers from all walks of life every Tuesday and Saturday at 6:30 p.m. only on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to TuriyaTalks and hit the bell icon to never miss an update.